So we'll kind of pick up on what we were doing last night, only try to make the focus more today on Acts 27 as opposed to the presentations that are in question. They might kind of overlap some, kind of did last night anyways, so it might still overlap. I really don't know why, unless it's this new computer that I have my, because the board's blurry on you, right? The board is blurry?
Yes, it is a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if coming closer
There we
helps.
go. That
Is that
helps a bit.
okay?
Thank you.
Makes it really tight for me in here, especially when I'm wrestling with a dog underneath my feet. So I thought we could make this a um, everybody contributing, if that, so that we can all kind of contribute to this and good exercise for the brain to do the review on Acts 27. And I'm still working on a few of the presentations. This is just going to be an overview and without a whole lot of details, but I hope that between us, we come up with more of the details as we go along and as we continue going forward as well to review. I know I mentioned something last night. It was probably on the other side of the board. When it comes to the south wind blowing, that the south wind actually, we talked about it last week briefly. If I understand it correctly, the south wind is I'm going to say cover. If that's the right way to say it, but a protection that because this nation set out to be a new world order. And who understands what that means to be a new world order?
Dictatorship,
Dictatorship, anything
soul power.
like unilateral, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, because I think I'm pulling from my own head that was from Elder Parmender's study, but I don't remember which one, and it might have been Elder Tess, but that you had, I think it was something from Elder Parmenter as well, because you had the papacy dealt with, right? 1989, the papacy receives the deadly wound. Did they say that right? Yeah. And so you have the papacy dealt with, and then you have the King of the South, the deadly wound and death dealt with, and all of that put cover or kept the United States from being that sole power. And with the King of the South gone, George Bush says, and I think I have it up here somewhere. Yeah, George Bush announces that we have a new world order, and that was on September 11th of 1990 that we now have a new world order. But we also know that what prevented the new world order from really coming to fruition.
What year was it? 1989, time of the end.
Yeah, 1989, time of the end. Yeah. What was your, was that just a question?
Yeah, I mean, trying to think of how the Soviet Union. That's when Soviet Union fell.
I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but you go through this history and you do have somewhere, I don't remember exactly where, maybe somebody remembers where, that you have Putin that rises to power. So really the King of the South wasn't out of the way. So there was a resurrection of the King of the South as well. But also you come through this history and the east wind as well, I hope I say this right, the east wind puts a restraint on the United States. So now the United States is into this war on terror. And then you have Putin rising. So in a sense, I understand it as the New World Order was delayed. So after you see the King of the South, you see the east wind. When we come down here, we see the death of the King of the South, and we'll see the east wind. But at this time, the United States has gone from the sixth kingdom up here, from the sixth kingdom falling to the seventh kingdom. So now you've got the seventh kingdom dictatorship, and who will punish the United States for that dictatorship?
Islam.
Islam. And I think we can look at as well, might have asked this question before, in 34 AD, on the line of Christ, 34 AD is what?
Sunday law,
Sunday law. And when was Jerusalem destroyed?
70 AD.
70 AD. So it didn't happen immediately, right? So keep that in mind as we trace through here and understand that looking at this from the point of the institutions, the two ships, Adramyttium and Alexandria, from the point of the two ships or the two institutions, and the institution's death or shipwreck, here, not to do with the people, but with the institutions. So Adramyttium, who wants to try to give us a little bit of a summary of Adramyttium? It's a test for all of us, not just me. What does Adramyttium mean?
Well, it means I shall abide in death.
I shall abide in death. Do you know why? I mean, that's the definition that you get for it, but do you know how that is applied? Do you remember how that is applied? Anybody?
Elaine, was it because Paul gives a message
Yes.
at Caesarea, and he gives it to Festus and Felix, or Felix and Festus, two
Correct.
state powers, and then he gives it to Agrippa, who was a Jewish king. Felix and Festus representing state power, and Agrippa representing knowing, the Jewish economy, so to speak. And even though they heard Paul's message, they still chose to keep going with the church and state combination. So they chose to abide in death. They heard it, but they didn't care.
They rejected the message. And more details as we'll go forward later, because I didn't pull up any notes. I do have a transcript of her first presentation, but just to go into Agrippa in particular. Felix and Festus didn't have the understanding, as you put it, the Jewish economy and all that. Agrippa understood the prophets, as was stated in the passages. Agrippa understood the prophets, the prophecies, and understood the temple. He was the one that was one of three that would appoint the high priest in the temple. So he represents church, as you said, and then Felix and Festus represented the United States. But we also mark, if anybody remembers, in 1989 now, Reagan and Bush, and then you have the SDA Church. So Reagan and Bush, you go through that transition from one leader to the next there. So Agrippa is marked as fourth generation. She points out that you can mark the fourth generation going down that line. And the fourth generation, I might get this mixed up. I will do it later in details. But Agrippa was the fourth generation, and I don't want to mix them up. One of them killed John the Baptist. One of them killed the children in Bethlehem and tried to kill Christ. One killed John the Baptist, one killed James, and then now you're down here at Agrippa. And so Agrippa, though, Paul tells him, you knew all this. So they get a message. And what does the message do to them? What's their, besides rejecting, what's the response that they get, that they have, besides rejecting?
They kill the messengers.
Something different than that.
Hmm.
Because they didn't
Well, I
kill
think-
Paul. Well, later Paul dies, yes, but not
I think, well, I think Festus, right, the state, Festus, said he was crazy. And I think, was it Agrippa, the church, said he was almost convinced to be a Christian.
Yeah.
What would it be that almost convinced him? Think about the waymark. What does the waymark represent? When you line up the angels, what is that waymark?
The time of the end,
The first angel brings a message that does what?
fear God.
Fear God. So when she reads through the passages, the quotes that she uses, it points, she's pointing out, Ellen White is pointing out that that it was a message of fear, making it the third angel's message. I mean, the first angel's message. But all are encompassed in, all three are encompassed in that one message. So when they rejected the first angel, they experienced the fear, they reject the message. Now, what happens? What happens when you reject the first angel?
You won't benefit from the second or the third angels.
Yeah, so they chose to, just to put a little more detail to it, so they chose to abide in death. And they rejected the message, they were not going to be able to hear the rest. And they chose to abide in death. Okay, so that's Caesarea and marked as the time of the end. Somebody want to walk us through 9/11 now? Any details you can remember for 9/11? Anybody?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking still from the line of Adramyttium, right?
Yeah. Yeah, here you can walk through it. Sidon can be found in the Bible under Zidon with a Z. So it can be Sidon or Zidon. And she lays out several passages that show you that when you're talking about Sidon or Zidon, you're talking about the same person. And I'm going to draw a blank. Somebody will have to refresh my memory because I don't have the notes in front of me, but is connected to Ham, I believe, and marks it down to the fourth generation. And we'll correct that later if we need to. But also reading in the quotes that when it comes to Sidon, you find a tarrying time. You find a oasis. What is an oasis? What would you label as an oasis?
Place of comfort.
An
Watering.
oasis? What was that?
Watering.
Watering,
Rain.
rain, refreshing.
Refreshing.
Okay. Oh, I pulled up the wrong, I'm going to pull up notes here, but I pulled up the wrong one. So give me just a second. And I'll try to get them in front of us because some of those details I don't remember and I don't want to mess up. Make it large enough. I don't know if I know how to make it bigger on here, but we'll see. Okay, you can see the notes now. Here we go.
Yes, it's kind of small. We can
Yeah,
see
I got it. I found it. Is that a little better?
A bit more.
Can you do it just a bit more, please? Much better.
Okay. So I just want to find a couple of the details if I could. And if I don't, then we're looking at the story of Paul's journey to Rome and Adramyttium, abide in death. And this is verses 1 to 5 that cover Adramyttium, and then the later verses cover Alexandria. So we know what it means to abide. And he's leaving Caesarea. So it's at Caesarea that Paul gives a message, three-step message: righteousness, temperance, and judgment. That's out of the book of Acts, I believe. And it's one of the verses that we could go to show the everlasting gospel. When we take this verse and say it's the three angels' messages, and in this context, Paul goes to Felix, and Ellen White says it's the first time that Felix has been presented with the gospel. So this is the passage here. The Jewish princess well understood the sacred character of that law which she had so shamelessly transgressed, but her prejudice against the man of Calvary steeled her heart against the word of life. But Felix had never before listened to the truth. And as the Spirit of God sent conviction to his soul, he became deeply agitated. Conscience, now aroused, made her voice heard, and Felix felt that Paul's words were true. Memory went back over the guilty past with terrible distinctness. There came up before him the secrets of his early life, of his I don't know how you say that, profligacy, I'm sorry, and bloodshed, and the black record of his later years. He saw himself licentious, cruel, raptious. Never before had the truth been thus brought home to his heart. Never before had his soul been so filled with terror. The thought that all the secrets of his career of crime were open before the eye of God, and that he must be judged according to his deeds, caused him to tremble with dread. So we saw fear, and we touched on that. And he never again received another call from God, and that represents the state. And then you had Festus, who comes in the place of Felix. Let's see. So Felix is a state power, the Roman state power, and we see at Caesarea, the first angel's message was rejected. And let's see if we can jump down to, we saw Agrippa. You want to get to 9/11. And those were the four names. Yeah, the fourth generation. Okay, so here's Zidon equals Sidon. And these are the verses. I can email these notes out if you want the transcript out, if you want later, or put them in the forum, probably is what I would do. Oh, so Sidon, it was Canaan. Okay, so Sidon was the firstborn of Canaan, and Zidon, the firstborn of Canaan. So it was the same person because Canaan cannot have more than one firstborn. So the name is spelled either way in the Bible. And we go through those fourth generations. And we're going to see Tyre. We want to look at Tyre now because Tyre and Sidon are generally connected together, or brings together a threefold union. So hopefully I follow this correctly. So Sidon is how it's used in the Bible, and placing 9/11, we're suggesting it represents the United States. And using Isaiah 23:1, verses 1 and 2, would somebody like to read that? just read this right here?
I can read.
Thank you.
It's from Isaiah 23, 1 through verses 1 and 2. It says, the burden of Tyre. Howl, ye ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste, so that there is no house, no entering in. From the land of Chittim, it is revealed to them. Be still, ye inhabitants of the isle, thou whom the merchants of Zidon that passed over the sea have replenished.
Okay, thank you. So Tyre is a story of judgment, and we identify as representative of the papacy. Tyre is the papacy, and then Zidon is represented as United States, and it's merchants of Zidon that have replenished Tyre. Replenished, thinking it was once full, it becomes empty, and it's going to be replenished or refilled. So Tyre was once full, the papacy was once full, it became weak. You say it lost its power. It's those merchants of Zidon that have brought Tyre or the papacy back to its original condition. You have the relationship between Tyre and Zidon. Forgive the typos because I haven't gone through and edited any of this. Okay, so then another verse that's going to also talk about Tyre and Zidon, Jeremiah 25:22. Somebody want to read that one?
I can.
Thank you.
And all the kings of Tyrus and all the kings of Zidon, and the kings of the isles which are beyond the sea.
So we're seeing that Tyrus and Zidon in there again together, and then also all the kings of the isles. So Tyre and Zidon are a conglomerate of powers. Somebody want to read Joel 3:4?
I'll read it.
Thank you.
Yea, and what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Sidon, and all the coasts of Palestine? Will ye render me a recompense? And if ye recompense me, swiftly and speedily will I return your recompense upon your own head.
So you have Tyre and Sidon, a conglomerate of powers, whether it's the kings of the islands or the coasts of Palestine. So when you see Zidon, it's talking about a threefold union. Got Tyre, Zidon, and the kings of the isles or the coasts of Palestine. So you see it in a threefold union. And then you see Ezekiel, both chapters 28 and 29. 28 is a judgment on Tyre. And I only have a few verses up there. So if somebody wants to read Ezekiel 28:13.
I'll go ahead and read it now that I'm home and I can see my screen.
Thank you.
Okay, Ezekiel 28:13. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering, thy sardius, topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle, and gold. The workmanship of thy tabrets, and thy pipes was prepared in the day that thou wast created.
So it's judgment on Tyre, and Tyre was in Eden. So she says we know that then there's a spiritual application. And if somebody wants to read the next one, Ezekiel 29:2 and 3.
I'll go ahead. 3. Son of man, set thy face against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and prophesy against him and against all Egypt. Speak and say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, the great dragon that lieth in the midst of his rivers, which hath said, My river is mine own, and I have made it for myself.
So we saw the judgment on Tyre, and it's not just talking about the city in next chapter, we have the judgment on Egypt. That's speaking of the dragon power. So you have the dragon power here. So we have the beast and the dragon. If you go between these two judgments, chapter 28, verse 21, somebody want to read? We run out of volunteers.
I can.
Okay, thanks.
Son of man, set thy face against Zidon, and prophesy against it.
So you have, again, the threefold union, the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. And Zidon is the false prophet. So Zidon, with a Z or an S, is placed at 9/11, representing the United States. You also mark it as a refreshing, an oasis, and also as fourth generation. And we'd have to go into more of the details to get that fourth generation to trace him back to where he comes from. So when you treat it like a parable, it just seems to grow. And I think that's all we have for that one. And we'll just be on our own for the rest of the way. So that gives us a little bit more on, a little bit more background on Felix and Festus and how we put Reagan and Bush at 1989, that transition, and also Agrippa representing the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They get a message that brings them fear, we read where it brought Felix fear. Never before had he had all his crimes put before him and seeing himself before God. And so he gets this message of fear, but neither is persuaded. And that fear represents the first angel's message, but encompassed in it is all three: righteousness. I don't remember how it's read in Acts. It doesn't say it the way it does in Revelation, I don't think. But so they get this threefold message and they reject it. Agrippa, I guess, would be more accountable because he knows the prophecies as well, and he still rejects it. So they move on. The chip continues on in Sidon, and you see it Sidon, a tearing and an oasis. The oasis being a watering, as I think Bell said, or refreshing. And we know that refreshing marks what at 9/11?
Early rain.
The early rain. So you have the early rain that begins here. And you have we'll kind of, I'm not so good at this area, so if anybody's because I could not remember. I know it's the false prophets, but that's the way she spelled the name on the board, and I was having a hard time remembering that part of the story. But we see when the ship travels from Sidon then to Cyprus, Cyprus meaning to be fair, and fair we talked about last night, because when she marks fair, she marks it as she marks that as the midnight cry. When she marks it as fair, Cyprus meaning fair as in I'm trying to think of the right word, but it had to do with the prophetic understanding. I don't have my board set to flip around again real quick. Hang on 1 second. I don't remember where we wrote it. We talked about it last night about having the right understanding, and when it comes to the test, being prophetically understanding. Maybe somebody remembers how we said it last night. Oh, it's right here. Sorry. Message of purity. Never mind. Message of purity. I think it was on the other side of the board. So it was a message of purity. Fair was representing this message of purity, meaning prophetic purity, not moral purity. And so you have the two false prophets marked here. You have an internal and an external false prophet. And you also have a representation here. I think it was Simon Magus as fourth generation. Simon Magus was actually baptized, if I remember right, in the church. Not the Jewish church, but I believe he was baptized with the disciples, by the disciples. Maybe somebody can correct me on that. But he was part of the movement, I believe.
Simon Magus was internal and Elymas was external.
Elements. That's what I thought. So maybe she had it spelled wrong or I was not being able to pick it up from the board work. Okay, so, and this is the area I kind of want to focus on a little bit as well. The time between Cyprus and Myra or Lycia. And this is where they go through the Sea of Cilicia, and Cilicia and Pamphylia. And Cilicia means to overturn, and Pamphylia is a nation made up of every tribe. So you see this overturning, and this is prophetically the falling, gradual, progressive falling of the sixth kingdom. The sixth kingdom represents what? We know it's the United States, but what does it specifically represent? You'd have, if you talked about with Hillary Clinton, what do they say, like the establishment or the establishment? But what kind of government is the sixth kingdom?
You're looking for democracy?
Yeah, democracy. So it's the falling of democracy, and then you have what? The dictatorship.
Dictatorship, which would be an autocrat.
Yeah. So you have this progressive falling. You also have the progressive falling of the king of the south. The king of the south receives the deadly wound. This would be Midnight Cry would be marked at Panium, and you see the deadly wound of the king of the south, and then you have this progressive falling and the death. And I don't think that we really fully understand. I know I don't yet. I don't think we do. What the death of the king of the south looks like, other than it won't look like we expect. And I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that, because it's after the death of the king of the south that if you look back at this history here, we'll go to this one here, where you have this new world order being announced. It's not going to be a new world order because the east wind puts a restraint. The United States winds up fighting this war on terror rather than progressing forward. And then you have the resurrection of Putin, the king of the south. So you still have the king of the south active here until Sunday Law or shipwreck. So we see it, Myra and Lycia marked at the Sunday Law, meaning bitterness and harvest, and a dictatorship marked there. So, and I think it came from verse 5, Acts 27, if that's correct. So that's Adramyttium. Anybody have any comments or things to add to Adramyttium?
Well, you asked a question about, what the downfall of King of the South looks like.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so going back to the lines of Antigonus, he made a deal with, I think he was king of the north, right? The establishment made a deal with, I can't remember who, but I think it was king of the south. Marked as king of the south, made a deal for a common purpose. I can't remember the details of that, but that's one part. But they were really never friends, but there was a deal between them. The other is King of the North, Hitler, and King of the South, Stalin, who also not friends, but made deals.
Mm-hmm.
And both of those, King of the North, in the Hitler's, he invaded, right? He broke the treaty, so in both of those instances with Antigonus and Hitler, it was King of the North who broke the treaty. So I can only imagine, following that structure and that logic, that it's, though Trump and Putin might look like friends, perhaps Trump was more interested in the power that Putin held, just like he's interested in the power that Kim Jong-un, the dictators, Xi Jinping held. they're not really friends per se, but Trump liked the power that each of these dictators held, which now he has. So looking back at those two structures, with Antigonus and Hitler, I could only think that Trump is going to break the treaty with Putin.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Val, could you made me think, there was a news report where they were talking to Trump, and Trump was like about the Ukraine war, and Trump basically said that Putin is my friend, and so I'll just talk with him and make some kind of agreement to end the Ukraine war. Um, Now that's not verbatim, but he did verbatimly say that Putin was his friend and that he would talk with him about how to end the war in Ukraine. Well, that's more like what was said.
I do know there was a headline, but I didn't read the story on it. I think it was this morning that Putin and Trump have talked, and Elon Musk was allowed in on the call. Just to add to that pot.
Yeah. Now here's an interesting thing about Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk wants a high position in Trump's cabinet, whatever that might look like. But here's two things that Elon Musk have done. When he did it, I'm not exactly sure, but I mean, we're dependent. I mean, we meaning me personally, dependent on Elon Musk's satellite, because we have the
Starlink.
Starlink. Yes.
Starlink.
So there's other countries that also depending, because he has satellites all over the place that goes all over the different countries. So there has been times, and I know he Ukraine. I don't know the technology, but apparently he was able to turn off the Starlink or the satellite to Ukraine. So when Ukraine needed vital information, Ukraine was not able to receive vital information because the satellite was turned off. Also with Taiwan, Xi Jinping wanted the satellites going over Taiwan to be turned off. So apparently he did that also. So he has that kind of power to turn off. So, we know this is an information war, right? So he has the power to turn on and off the power of gathering intelligence information.
Yeah, he's definitely risen into a place of prominence on this line, it would seem. And he does want a position, what I understood, I don't remember but something to do with finance, and that what he wants to do is basically what he did when he took over Twitter. Get rid of everybody. Get rid of all these, all the programs that he thinks are waste, and restructure everything. And the article talked about how it was going to hurt everyone first before you could start to restructure and rebuild. So basically saying that, where all the Trump supporters believe that he's going to come in and make everybody wealthy economically, he's great for the economy. And if Elon Musk gets his way, he'll be gutting out all of that. That's going to really cause a lot of problems around the world, or in the United States. when it comes to inflation and everything else, and then go from there and restructure. He was basically writing up a warning that it's not going to be good. It's going to be bad before it gets good. That's what I do remember about that. But where you get into the King of the South, I don't fully know either what it looks like. We know it's related to spheres of influence as well. So anyways, that's more to try to continue to understand. But it does
Another
mark,
thing too, Elaine,
yeah, go ahead.
to add to what Phil was saying, yeah, this economic policy with Musk, I'm looking at it right now because I had seen this headline, and I don't know what this will entail, but it says Musk plan to cut $2 trillion in US
Yes.
spending could bring economic turmoil. So he's giving him free rein and
If he gets
cleaning
that
things
position.
up, like getting rid of anything that has to do with checks and balances,
Yeah,
you know, which would, that's gutting some of the mainstay that's needed, you know, that the Democrats have, of course, you know, regulations on things. So
thank you. Yeah,
unless they fall apart in their relationship, that could happen too.
yeah, and I don't remember in reading the article if it referenced specifically back to Twitter. I just do remember that going through my mind. It's like, look what he did at Twitter. He just,
Oh my, yeah.
you know, those people. It just, ripped
Just dumped them all. Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Say that
Can you guys hear me?
That's
Yes.
Donna. Yeah.
Okay, good, because I'm wearing this new thing in my ear. Anyway, okay, good. Just to kind of go off what Jackie was saying and what Elaine was saying, I was listening to this. So I was listening to this podcast. Well, in this podcast, they had this person called David Frum, and he's Canadian American double citizenship, but he was I guess the speechwriter for George W. Bush. And well, he's always been a Republican, so he has kind of the inside stuff. I think he's in Canada right now, but he said that he mentioned that there's two South African, a couple, actually, he said there's a few South African billionaires, and he mentioned what's his name? We were just talking about Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. And he said that they've been forming this alliance to bring down the government, to like they want not just small government, they almost want no government. So he says that Elon buying Twitter, it was not he didn't do it to make money. He knew he was gonna crush it. So he took 80% and then he got rid of 80% of employees, everything. He downsized it about 80%. That was a test. And it was a way for him to test his strategy to bring down the American government. So he didn't buy Twitter for the purpose of it wasn't a venture capitalist thing. It was to take it and to see buying it at the top of its thing, because it was the social media where everybody went, and seeing if he could restructure it, meaning bringing it down 80%. So now 20% of it works. And then to see how to make that 20% work to facilitate their what they're going to do in federal government. So this is what David Frum was saying. And he said a lot of other things, but he said that Donald Trump, this whole allegiance where people, the manosphere and all this stuff has all been strategized very strategically by specific billionaire men funding these even podcasts and little things here and there that you would think, oh, there's no way they would have money, but they actually got money from all these places to facilitate what they do to get certain spheres of influence on the American population. And they said that now that Donald Trump, and he said it, and he said he's a long lifetime Republican, and he said he has just recently withdrawn his Republican thing, and he's just sick of it. And he said that this is the beginning of the downfall of democracy, and not just America, it's the world, because what they plan to do is conglomerate all the wealthiest people in the world, which happen to be men, and bring them together in a coalition, and Donald Trump will be at the head of it. And so you're going to have all these wealthy, and from what I hear, there's a few in South Africa, wealthy billionaires. Peter Thiel's part of it, of course, Elon Musk. And of course, they live in America now, but they can't come from these different areas. And they're going to conglomerate together with superpower and not just bring down the government of America, but they're going to subjugate the whole world to what they want. They're going to make the whole world. And I guess this is when Jesus comes in. So I'm thinking, wow, this was their plan from a long time. And this whole plan started to gain traction during the Bush administration, in 2001, or no, it was 2000 when Bush was elected, because actually the real steal was Bush, because Gore actually won that race. And so but they found out, because that was another test, as how good that they're lying and cheating and all that stuff, how much success they would get. And they had 3 lawyers when Bush was in his trouble, because he was actually not leading. He was falling short big time. And they brought 3 lawyers to Florida from different states to fight for Bush. And those lawyers were Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and John Roberts. So this whole plan they had is just only now coming to fruition, but they really started during the George W. Bush thing, because Gore really did win. But they found a way, to make sure that Bush got in there, and Bush really fast forward a lot of the agenda. He's under the radar. You don't listen to him. You don't hear him. You notice that he wasn't one of the past presidents that, went against Donald Trump. He was the only silent one. And it's because he's part of it. He started it. So anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Thank you for that, because then you can see that at that time where you have the east wind come in, and that distracts from, the United States winds up involved in this war on terror, and it distracts from, and it's a restraint on the United States, and
Right.
distraction from their agenda.
Right.
So bitterness is marked at shipwreck, which I thought, and that's from Myra and Lycia, bitterness and harvest. If you think about the election, I know somebody said to me, this was back when we were in Florida, because it was when we were in Florida when the DNC was happening, and Kamala Harris gave her speech accepting the nomination. And in watching, I don't know how, maybe we all watched it, I know I did, and just seeing everybody so hopeful, right? There was so much energy and so much hope and so much inspiration that was taking place. And we already knew prophetically who was going to win. So sitting back, watching that back in August, right? It was August. Watching that in August, knowing that all their excitement is going to be deflated into bitter disappointment, which I think they're dealing with that now, that there's this bitter disappointment. And so I don't know if that's the only bitterness, but that's definitely a bitterness that there was hope that Trump would not get back into office. And but he did. So all that, for anybody that watched it or watched her path since she became the nominee, or, became the front runner against Donald Trump, and watched the enthusiasm and imagine that enthusiasm, and then what happened with the election. Just another thing to put it back to what we were talking about last night, marking the great test, Sunday law, at the election, because it also brought that disappointment as well. So it's the falling of the overturning, and the nation made up of every tribe. It's this overturning that brings on the fall of the sixth kingdom, which is the establishment as we know it. It's democracy, the government as we know it, and now it's a dictatorship. We know that he's not inaugurated in, but the people spoke. If you go back to First Chronicles chapter 8, I believe, and the people are asking Samuel, we want a king, you're old, and there's no one to take, your sons aren't going to take your place, and we want a king, and we want to be like everybody else. We don't want God ruling us anymore. We want a king. They wanted to be like the rest of the nation. So God tells Samuel, go tell him everything that your king is going to do, and what it's going to be like living under that type of government. And we can see this history back in here, especially if you go back to 2016, when Trump first gets elected the first time. From there forward, you definitely see who Trump is. If you didn't know who he was before, we can mark him all the way back in 1989. But if you did not see who he was before, you know now who he is, and so now you get to witness what your king that you're asking for is going to be like. So you get to the election, and what did the people say? What did they say in 1 Samuel 8? Anybody remember?
We'll have our king.
We'll have our king. And that's what the election basically said, we'll have our king. So I kind of want to try to make sure I use this phrase, and maybe we all could use this phrase instead. And I know I've messed up on that, but just stick with the east wind. So that covers Adramyttium, but we know that I believe that's the first 5 verses of Acts, but we know that Paul was on a different, he gets on a different ship, and that different ship is the ship of Alexandria. And Alexandria is the breadbasket, right? For Rome, I believe is what it's called, the breadbasket of Rome. And so it's out of Alexandria that ships are loaded with the grain. The grain is grown along the Nile, if I remember right, and it's then taken out on these ships, and its ultimate destination we know is Puteoli. So Paul gets on that ship, and she marks Paul getting on the ship here at Myra and Lycia, same as you have here, but it's not the same waymark. She's using parable methodology to line up this line of the ship of Alexandria. So we know the ship, he gets on the ship here, but we know that the ship begins in Alexandria. So it's a ship of Alexandria, meaning it begins at Alexandria, and it's carrying the wheat, and it's representing also the USA and the SDA church. So what does Alexandria mean? I'm sure we all remember, what does Alexandria mean?
Defender of the people.
Yeah, the protector or defender of the people. So they're going to be protected. And you start out with the 2 horns here, and I think there's been progress on when it comes to the breaking of those horns. I think she later went on and showed that those horns don't ever really break. And but you've got the 2 horn power here, starting out at 1798, the SDA Church, and they have established the Constitution, but do they understand it? Do they really understand what their mission is? That's the glorious land, because they have slavery embedded in there, and So there's still a lot of work to do. So they don't understand the message. You have William Miller, I think that's when he gets his concordance, but yet William Miller is not yet on the scene. He's studying. So while you have this prophetic marker here at 1798, you can go to Ellen White's writings and understand that that's the United States rising up. But they don't understand yet its purpose. October 22nd, marking again Myra and Lycia. So she marks it in both places. The disappointment, it's marking it as harvest and bitter. There's a bitter disappointment here at October 22nd when they thought what did they believe was going to happen in October 22nd, 1844.
Second coming.
Yeah, they believed it was going to be a second coming. So they had a wrong understanding also of prophecy. So the ships set sail. There's a different disappointment at Myra and Lycia. I don't know if anybody wants to look up. Well, we'll do this at another time. We're just let's keep going with just the overview because I'm going to continue working on transcribing the studies as well. So we'll continue that so that it can just at least build as we do the reviews and try to get it all stuck in our heads. So the ship continues to sail and it comes to the next stop at Cnidus. Cnidus is marked at 1863 and it sits in the middle of the Civil War. And you mark here that the church rejects the 2520. And then you'll see the creation of the National Reform Movement. And what is the National Reform Movement going to do? Anybody remember?
Church and state
Yeah.
union. Elaine, but before you move to ahead of the study, could you go back to the the third dispensation between Cyprus and what is the other one? The last one?
You're talking about here?
Yes.
Okay,
That
what?
as the sixth kingdom falls, the seventh kingdom rises. Well, according to Elder Tess, is the United Nations, the one that is going to rise. But now that I've been looking at the situation, is I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but it appears to me that by the union, meaning the threefold union of the modern Babylon or modern Rome, and then that the head that was wounded in 1798 is resurrected, but it is not that directly involving the papacy, but a representative of the papacy, which is J.D. Vance. But that is only an speculation, because Elder Tess clearly says that the fifth, when the sixth kingdom falls, the seventh kingdom, and you can see it in Acts of the Apostles and pretty much all of them, the ones here in the United States as well as the ones in France. It puts the United Nations there, and that is bugging me because it's very important to have that clear if it is gonna be, because the thing is that if it is the United Nations and Elder Parminder presented at one of the classes recently that the United Nations is a friendly institution of the movement because of the human rights. But the thing is that according to Elder Tess, the principle of the United Nations was flipped by the United States when they declared that the new world order has to be that the United States becomes the unilateral power in the world, which is against the original intent of the United Nations. So I was wondering if there's somebody gonna clarify that, because there cannot be two opposing views as far as the United Nations is concerned, and so
It's my most recent understanding from what's been taught. The USA we see as a dictatorship, and it's actually going to be the head or boss or dictate to the UN. And that's as far as I can go with how I understand it so far.
oh, so you had the UN over there then.
Yeah, so the USA is going to be over the UN. However, whatever that looks like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I was. Remember that when you were presenting the I think it was the fifth head or something like that, and I was saying that the United Nations and the United States were going to be, maybe those presentations are recorded or something, but I now have the doubt that the United by that we can have a united front of nations, because Pamphylia, that's what it means, a nation, a form of every tribe. And and then unless we have a different type of the United Nations, like a counterfeit to it, because the United Nations right now there is a left, or the ones that are in solidarity with the South, with the King of the South, that they are united, like Russia, North Korea, Iran, and all of the people of the left bloc, as they are called. And maybe that's a different kind of the United Nations and not the institution of the United Nations, because somebody has to clarify that, because I think it is very important.
Perhaps as, excuse me, Troy said earlier in the chat, excuse me, that more light will come. Excuse me. Hopefully I clear that up. That more light will come as we progress forward. Or we may be cutting off my study now if I can't keep going. But that's the way I most recently understand it, is that the United States will be over, or however it looks, dictate to the UN. And so one will be a new world order, a one world order, and that will eventually escalate into the return of the East Wind to kill. So going back to Sinitis, we know we had the Civil War here. What did Ellen White say about, she said the United States was being judged. Why did she say the United States was being judged? What were they being judged on? For? Say that again.
Slavery.
Slavery. So they're being judged on slavery. And it's interesting she said that, because yet we still take from all this history, the Millerite history, when the Sabbath is reinstituted, we still take from all of that the Sabbath is the great test, when judgment is coming because of slavery. And I just find that interesting that we took that route and we carried it all the way through to up until the midnight cry, to even still think that the Sabbath Sunday was the issue. So the Civil War was it was a judgment here on slavery. So we see there were contrary winds, marking contrary winds here at with the rejection, and then the National Reform Movement. They sail, I think it says under Crete, but when it says sailing under Crete, it didn't mean geographically under Crete, under the cover of Crete. So they sail along, if I understand it correctly, along the peninsula, and here's Crete, and they're going in between. So it's this protection from the winds. Until they get to 1989, 1989, Lycia marks the wise. So you have this movement that's going to raise up now. Adventism's been in darkness. You've got the movement being raised up. You've got you've got the deadly wound of the papacy. You've also got the deadly wound of the King of the South and the death of the King of the South. And with the death of the King of the South, that's where George Bush Sr. makes his speech, September 11, 1990, that we now have a new world order. Because you have the King of the South out of the way. And so it's no longer a struggle for over two superpowers. It's one power, and it's the United States. Going back to some of the comments on the UN, we were looking at the studies on the human rights, and although they are friendly to human rights, they really don't do they don't do a lot. There's no teeth, no law in what they do, and the nations that are part of them all have to go along with these things. And who was the biggest one to keep themselves out of some of those? I'm trying to think. Yeah, the United States. I was trying to think of how to say that. Some of the programs that they put in was the United States. They didn't. The United States doesn't want anybody coming in and telling them what to do. So it's kind of interesting. You can see that the United States doesn't go along with a lot of the UN organization because it doesn't want its sovereignty interfered with. So okay, so that marks 1989. You have the south wind that's blowing, and when the south wind blowing, it's favorable winds, it's protection. But then the south wind, we see that goes down, and then following that, you get to 9/11, and you have if I say this right, I think it could be said different ways, Euroclydon, which is an east cyclone, a cyclone from the east, marking that as the east wind. And this is where the ship, because we're on the journey of the ship, this is where the ship begins to take on water. And we'll read more of those details in further studies, but the ship begins to take on water. And then what do they do to try to save the ship?
You undergird the ship with ropes.
With ropes, and ropes representing representing what?
Line upon line.
Line upon line. So it's maintaining the ship on its journey, but it's a struggle all along this journey. So then you come to this was verses 13, 14, Acts 27. You come to verse 26, and it's the 14th night, which is marked at midnight. Where do we look at to understand the 14th night? Anybody remember?
Passover.
Say that again.
The celebration of the Passover.
No, not for this one. What did the 14th night? Where do we pull that from in Millerite history?
Oh, that is the midnight cry.
Midnight cry.
Yes.
Samuel Snow.
Samuel Snow arrives at Exeter with the midnight cry. And this is also, and I put this on here from her board, but it seems like the time should be here, but this was from her board, and maybe as we go through it, we'll make sure we're correct, but this is how her board was written up. Because you get the message of time. They do the sounding. Well, actually, they do two soundings is probably why we see that. There's two soundings that are done. And the first sounding is, a fathom is 72 inches. The first sounding they do, and they know that they're coming close to land. It's dark, they can't see, and they drop whatever it is they drop that measures how close they are to the ground. And they found that the first sounding that they were at 20 fathoms, which is 1,440 inches. And then the second sounding, they're at 15 fathoms, so they're drawing closer, they see that. And when you total the two, it adds up to 2,520, 2,520 inches. But it's representing the 2520, which what does the 2520 represent to us?
Time.
Time, a message of time. So you get a message of time. And so and I think I messed that up last night because that's what it is. There's two soundings, and I think there's one here and one here, if that's correct. 26 and 27. So you have two soundings, and they're getting closer and closer to land. And representing those, showing that they now have a message of time. And we kind of discussed that last night when it came to the issue of the election. And when we looked at, we just discussed briefly the revolutions. We didn't go into any detail of the revolutions, but we know that the revolutions gave us what? What did the revolutions give us? If anybody remembers from last night.
Midpoint, the midway.
No, not. That's another side of the story with that, but something in particular we got from the revolutions.
Was it the rise and fall of nations?
The rise and fall of dictators. You had
Dictators, yeah.
And the rising of a dictatorship, but it also gave us one other key important thing. What happened in 2019?
Donald Trump
Impeachment.
became a dictator.
What date? What date?
Close of probation?
Number 9.
November 9. Yeah. And
Yeah.
yes, you could say that too. It gave us November 9. And I don't remember the event specifically connected to that. We have to go back through some of those studies with it's not Pyrrhus, but some of those studies that go back through the battles, Heraclea and the different battles. But there was a significant event that was marking November 9. But November 9, she took from the revolutions to show the falling of a nation and the rise of a dictator. So it gave us a date, a specific date, and it was one place where we got a specific date. So you get a message of time. So at Panium, which is, when you look down here on the line, this is the line that represents the people. These are the lines that represent the ships, the journey of the ship. When you come down to 2021 in Panium, it represents the formalization. So when you look at the little way marks, so you have your little way marks between the big ones. And at the formalization, and these are the little way marks from 2001 to Sunday Law. And at the formalization, you always get a message of time. So you have a message of time. But when we talked about last night, November 9th, about the question about whether or not Elder Tess taught us, how did she go about teaching us November 9? I mean, she worked her way through getting us to the place where we were best prepared to understand the message of time, if that makes sense. And I think I remember it was in Italy. That was in Italy. That was before FFA fell away, where Elder Parmenter gave a presentation talking about time. And I remember knowing that there's a message of time that we're getting prepared to hear. And it was just prior to that. And so anyway, so there's a message of time on the ship. They're seeing a message of time. And Panium marks the formalization when it comes to the people. So I'm myself, my own personal thoughts, that if Elder Tess was here, we still would have probably eventually been given that date. But I think we looked at enough evidence last night to show the Sunday Law. Why did we say Sunday Law? I don't know that still a lot of you were silent, so I'm just assuming some of the silence meant that we were all in agreement, but some, if not, why did we come to the conclusion that July could not have been Sunday Law? Anybody remember?
It has to do with election.
Why? That's one.
Biden
What?
Biden is still the president, so he was not the dictator. So there's no way that July could have been because Biden's still the president.
Because to say it July, that would mean that the United States was a dictatorship, which would mean the current president, which is Biden in July, was a dictator. So, and he's not. So that's a big one. And then what Bell said about the election, because Elder Tess had already made this comments, and I think Elder Parmenter has repeated it or said it as well. However, that the waymarks are connected to the election cycle. So we also know that the Great Test, I think we looked at this as well. The Great Test, we looked at Eden, where you had all the trees of the garden that Adam and Eve could eat from, and you had the one tree that they could not eat from, and they chose to eat from that one tree, and Elder Test marked that as an election. And so if there was an election at the beginning, there would be an election at the end. So there are several things that give us, to show us that the election marks the Great Test. Because when you go through it, and this touches on the inauguration as well, because you can go through the ceremony, yes, but the people decided and chose or elected when. When did they elect their dictator?
When they voted.
November 5th.
When they voted.
Mm-hmm.
There's another thing that it remains to be seen, and it is the fall or the death of the King of the South. And in addition to that, there is what the Life of Paul says, that the ship was hit by the Hurricane in November, and because in November cannot be used as a symbol, because the phenomena is a natural phenomenon that still exists right now as we talk. So
I don't remember the page number on it, but it marks it at November. The Life of Paul. Yeah, marks it at November. And I think that Elder Tess had pointed that out before she was had left as well. So one last point, and we'll finish it off for here. And hopefully we're reviewing those presentations on our own as well, so that this can be really solidified in our mind what this is telling us. But another point I started to make last night, and just to reiterate it again, because I do remember when we did, for those of us that were around when the Midnight Cry first happened, those that were among the Sacramento group, and anybody that joined us at the time, we went through the Brazil School of Prophets, every single study, and then we went through the Guadalupe presentations, every single study. And in those studies, I always remember this, but I myself kind of didn't really connect it thoroughly in my head. But the point that she was making when it comes to the story of the ship, because we had a message of midnight and midnight cry, and our message, what was being said, and I think this was before FFA was gone. How were we referring to this sequence, if anybody remembers? Midnight, midnight cry, what? What followed midnight cry?
Was that, well, I know there's prediction before midnight, or PBM, I think that was called.
Oh yeah, not that one. Yeah, that.
No?
Yeah, not
Okay.
that one, but because yes, that was supposed to be pre-midnight or something like that. Something before midnight, so it would have been something before midnight, then midnight cry. So what followed midnight cry?
That's the shipwreck.
Shipwreck. If you're looking at
Yep.
the ship,
Sunday law.
that's the one that I wanted to get at, because it was being referred to as midnight cry, Sunday law. So that's a difference. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, because I listened to this very same study and I wrote this line out. I drew it out. So I was going to ask you a couple other questions on it too. But it is shipwreck after midnight cry. But when is the midnight cry? Was there a date on that?
Midnight Cry was Panium.
Oh, it's Panium.
Midnight.
And
Midnight.
that was that 2019?
Yeah, we'll look at that over
21.
here. We'll look at that over
21.
here. So what you had, yeah, 2021, both of them, 2019 and 2021. So when you look at the people, because we had Rafi and Panium, I think that was in 2016 when those battles were pulled out of Daniel 11, right? Daniel 11. Those battles, is that right? Daniel 11. Those battles were pulled out and put into place. And even though initially they weren't given dates, eventually we became to know because she understood November 9. So November 9 marked Raphia. And then the date was put up early on as 2021. And then it was kind of pulled away and wasn't being put as a date. Why do we not put a date too soon? I don't know if I have the right answer myself, but people get, I'm pretty sure Elder Tess made a comment about it, that people get too fixed on the date. And what we needed to understand was the events. And
The
so-
event then. Yeah.
yeah, so we
Emphasis
had-
on the event, not the date.
Right. So we had Raphia and Panium. Raphia and Panium were this increase of knowledge and a formalization that led to Sunday law. That's representing the people. When it comes to the ship, this can't be a Sunday law. It can't go midnight cry, Sunday law, because midnight cry precedes what?
Sunday.
Say that again?
Sunday law.
No, it can't be a Sunday law because
The midnight cry precedes. You said precedes the Sunday law. No? It's before
What is
the
the
Sunday law.
midnight cry? What is the midnight cry warning of?
The midnight cry is telling you that there is that the Sunday law is coming right away.
There'll be a
Um,
shipwreck.
Yeah,
Shut
exactly.
door. Shut door. Shut
Shut
doors.
door.
So I have shut door shipwreck, but not Sunday law. When you're using the term
Okay.
midnight cry is telling you the close of probation is coming, the shut door is coming, and this is when it comes to the two institutions, the shut door on the institutions. Just like when you go back to the line of Christ, 34 AD was a shut door on the institution,
Oh,
not
give
on
me
the
an-
people.
give me another name for the shut door.
Close of
Another-
probation.
What do
Yeah.
you say?
Close of probation.
Okay, so
DOP.
do you see how then Elena is right when she says that the Sunday law or the close of probation, which is the close of probation for the Levites, Islam is gonna attack. Well, the ship that suffers the shipwreck is because of the east wind, and that east wind was hit when the first and second angel came, and when the close of probation of the two institutions closes, then we're gonna have again, because it's when the second and third angels are empowered. So we're gonna have again another hit, but we don't know how. We're not talking about the destruction of the buildings or anything like that. But according to the magazine, The Time of the End, Elder Pippinger was telling us in that magazine that Islam attacks the economy of the United States. So we have to be paying attention to those details because they are important. So Elena's presentations cannot be discarded without a very close examination. And actually, none of them. I know that Pedro makes some mistakes, but they are not bringing us peace and safety messages. Therefore, we cannot label them as false prophets. They are all bringing us
I don't know that
light.
anybody's labeled them as false prophets. They're all members of this movement and all partakers of the truth.
Well, then, but you know that there is teachers that are teaching falsehood, and they are priests. I'm not talking about any other people away from the. But the thing is that those messages that they brought, they have plenty of light for us, and so we just need to close examine them, and then keep that which is good, and discard that whatever is not good. But they all have the same line as a foundation, the same two lines as the foundation for what they are teaching. And I'm not saying that Elder Tess is wrong, but because that line that she adds from Melita to Puteoli, or to Puteoli, that line can be used as a symbol and be superimposed as Elena did. And when you bring all the lines together, they are in perfect harmony. So you have to be careful. Yeah.
Anybody want to comment on that? We're out of time, but if anybody wants to comment, then we'll close it off there. Anybody want to comment on Manuel's comments? If not, we'll pick it up there next time we get back to Acts 27, if that's okay. Because I think we talked about that last night already as well. So we can spend more time on it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with Manuel, and especially in terms of I was just reading a devotional this morning called "Ye Shall Receive Power," for this date, actually, November 9th, if anybody wants to read that. But what I did notice was that it was saying about receiving light through the messengers, and how the Holy Spirit can already be, the rain falling around us and not being aware of it. And it says something about your heart. If your heart is not open, then you're not gonna receive that light. And that was, when I read that, I just was like, wow, so that this devotional is called "Ye Shall Receive Power," and it's actually November 9th. And today is the 9th, right?
Yes.
Yes, I encourage everyone to read it, because it is very, very important for us to be ready. Because if we're not ready receiving it, then definitely we have to search our hearts.
Another issue is that if this is the Weimar of the Sunday law, remember, Boston is representing a newborn child, a child that is going to be in development. So the increase of knowledge is going to come soon. But as of right now, we don't have to expect something already polished or ready for the test, because there's 2 more waymarks before the close of probation. And so at the midnight cry in the next dispensation, we're gonna be already like mature enough to digest all the information that we have received. All right.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that for now. And we did touch on that last night. We can touch on it again next time we get into this study. So is there somebody that would like to close in prayer?
I want to pray.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Manuel.
Dear Lord, I don't know how to pray. I just know that the Holy Spirit takes and rearrange our words and the intensity of our feelings to heaven. He is our translator, our master, and our teacher. And we want to be taught as little kids. And because this truth are immensely beautiful and deep, and we want to start enjoying our journey, because you provide everything we need. You provide the light, the midnight cry, and also the light ahead of us. Which is your powerful arm raised up to illuminate our way, our path. Please, Lord, bless us with your Holy Spirit, and let us examine all things as it is written, and be selected of the jewels that you have given us. Thank you for the people, and thank you for letting me know Edita, my paisana. And keep us safe, Lord, in your arms. In the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
So
Thank you.
Edita is from Honduras, and I am from Honduras. So you met my paisana, and I guess it's the only one from Honduras besides me
Wow.
that is in the movement.